Aggression in different domains of everyday life. In the previous chapters, we examined research about aggression as a general construct without distinguishing between its different forms and manifestations. In the chapters to come, the focus will shift towards a closer analysis of different forms of aggressive behavior in specific domains. We begin in the present chapter by examining common forms of aggressive behavior in 4 areas of everyday life contexts: in school, at the workplace, on the roads, and in the sports world. Chapter 8 then moves to the protected realm of the family, where aggression is nonetheless a sad reality in the form of sexual, physical, and emotional abuse of children, as well as violence against partners and elders. Chapter 9 focuses on sexual aggression, most notably against women, but it will also consider the problem of male sexual victimization. Chapter 10 turns to different forms of aggression and violence that arise from confrontations between social groups, such as gangs, ethnic groups, and mobs. Chapter 11 will review the growing literature aimed to understand terrorism as a particular form of group-based aggression, before we turn to the prevention of aggression and violence in Chapter 12. School bullying. The past 40 years have seen the emergence of a large research literature dealing with bullying in the context of schools. Bullying comprises forms of aggressive behavior which are directed at victims who cannot easily defend themselves. Bullying is carried out with the intention of inflicting harm on the target person, thus meeting the core definition of aggressive behavior. In addition, bullying is characterized by 2 features: an imbalance of power between the aggressor and the victim, resulting, for example, from differences in physical strength or status in a job hierarchy, and the repeated occurrence over time. Thus, a single aggressive confrontation and aggressive behavior towards a target of equal strength or status would fall outside the definitional boundaries of bullying. Bullying, also known as mobbing, denotes aggressive behavior directed at victims who cannot easily defend themselves, commonly in schools and at the workplace. Bullying can take both direct forms, such as physical and verbal attacks and sexual harassment, and indirect forms, such as relational aggression, i.e., behavior directed at damaging the victim's peer relationships. With the advent of modern communication technology, cyberbullying has appeared on the agenda as a new manifestation of bullying. Cyberbullying is carried out by means of modern technology, such as computers, cell phones, or other electronic devices, to inflict intentional harm on a peer repeatedly and over time. Sending threatening emails, posting derogatory comments about a marginalized classmate on internet platforms, or circulating photos designed to embarrass or humiliate another person of lesser popularity or status, or sharing sexual images of persons with others without their consent are all examples of cyberbullying. There has been some debate among researchers as to whether cyberbullying is a conceptually distinct construct from face-to-face bullying, but the majority opinion seems to be to regard it as just a different means of engaging in bullying behavior. The overlap between the 2 forms, such that many victims of traditional face-to-face bullying also report being cyberbullied and vice versa, is consistent with this view. Cyberbullying involves the use of modern technology, such as computers, cell phones, or other electronic devices, to inflict intentional harm on others. Different methods have been employed to study bullying. First, there is a range of self-report instruments that ask participants to indicate the frequency with which they engaged in bullying behavior or experienced bullying, or both, during a certain period of time, such as the last month or the last year. Self-reports can be elicited either through general questions, see for example the study by the World Health Organization 2004, or through multiple items that specify different behavioral forms of bullying. A second methodological approach involves peer nominations, in which peers are asked to name those members of their class or work group that engage in, or are made to suffer from, a range of different behaviors representing bullying. Bully or victim scores are assigned to individuals based on the aggregated peer nominations. In a third approach, parents and teachers can be asked to provide assessments of a child's bully and/or victim status, and employees can be asked to nominate colleagues who bully or are bullied by others. Finally, direct observation can be used in certain settings, such as school breaks or office meetings, whereby trained observers record the frequency and the social context of bullying. For all of these approaches to the measurement of bullying, it is important to provide participants with a clear definition of bullying to ensure that they respond on the basis of the same understanding of the term. A common definition, which is part of the OES Bully Victim Questionnaire, is shown in box 7.1. This section summarizes the extant literature on the prevalence, risk factors, and consequences of bullying during childhood and adolescence, and discusses evidence on the effectiveness of anti-bullying programs. Wherever possible, we refer to meta-analytic studies, which have the advantage of integrating results from a number of individual studies, thereby yielding more solid conclusions. Prevalence of bullying. The most extensive research program on the causes, manifestations, and consequences of bullying has been conducted in Norway by Olias and his colleagues. Olias 2017. A meta-analysis of 80 studies reporting prevalence rates for traditional bullying and cyberbullying in adolescent samples found an overall prevalence of 36% for traditional face-to-face bullying and 15% for cyberbullying. Corresponding rates for self-reported engagement in bullying behavior were 35% for traditional and 16% for cyberbullying. The two forms of bullying were correlated for both perpetration, R equals 0.47, and victimization, R equals 0.40, indicating that many adolescents engage in or experience both traditional and cyberbullying. Another meta-analysis confirmed this overlap. They included 137 unique datasets that contained 736 independent effect sizes, and found further support for the overlap between traditional and cyberbullying of R equals 0.45 for perpetration and R equals 0.40 for victimization. However, they also showed that traditional and cyberbullying were associated with some distinct risk factors and psychological outcomes, which we will discuss later in this section. Focusing on the role of gender in cyberbullying perpetration, the meta-analysis by Bartlett and Coyne 2014 found that girls were somewhat more likely to report cyberbullying behavior under the age of 11, but boys were more likely to engage in cyberbullying from mid-adolescence onwards. Box 7.1 Definitions of bullying presented to research participants based on Olias 2012. Traditional bullying. We say a student is being bullied when another student or several other students say mean and hurtful things about them or make fun of them or call them mean and hurtful names, completely ignore or exclude them from their group of friends or leave them out of things on purpose, hit, kick, push, shove around, or lock them inside a room, tell lies or spread false rumors about them, or send mean notes and try to make other students dislike them, and other hurtful things like that. When we talk about bullying, these things may happen repeatedly, and it is difficult for the student being bullied to defend themselves. We also call it bullying when a student is teased repeatedly in a mean and hurtful way. But we don't call it bullying when the teasing is done in a friendly and playful way. Also, it is not bullying when two students of about the same strength or power argue or fight. Cyberbullying. Here are some questions about being bullied electronically. When we say bullied electronically, we mean bullied through email, instant messaging, in a chat room, on a website, or through a text message sent to a cell phone. Although traditional bullying and cyberbullying show considerable overlap, there are two distinct characteristics of cyberbullying that should be noted. The first is that the ability to engage in cyberbullying is not dependent on physical strength, and the second is that it can be carried out under the cloak of anonymity. In combination, these two aspects considerably lower the threshold for bullying others compared with face-to-face forms of bullying. In line with these considerations, Bartlett et al. 2017 found in a 3-wave longitudinal study that participants' belief in the anonymity of cyberbullying and the irrelevance of muscularity for online bullying predicted positive attitudes towards cyberbullying, which in turn predicted cyberbullying behavior. These pathways remain significant when controlling for both cyberbullying and traditional bullying behavior at the first data wave. An international survey conducted in collaboration with the World Health Organization asked 11 to 15-year-olds in 40 countries about their experiences as perpetrators and victims of traditional face-to-face bullying. After presenting a definition of bullying similar to the one in box 7.1, 2 questions were asked. How often have you been bullied at school during the last couple of months, and how often have you taken part in bullying other students in the last couple of months? The response options range from I have not been bullied, I have not bullied, to several times a week. The findings based on responses from over 200,000 participants are presented in Figure 7.1. Across all 40 countries, 10.7% of respondents reported bullying others, 12.6% reported having been bullied, and 3.6% reported being both bullies and victims. Bullying rates were consistently higher for boys than for girls, and victimization rates were higher for girls than for boys in most countries. A striking finding that can be gleaned from Figure 7.1 is the wide variation in reported rates of being a victim, a bully, or both between the different countries, ranging from under 10% of boys and girls in Sweden to 45% for girls and 38% for boys in Lithuania. As the questions and instructions were the same in each country, this variation cannot be attributed to differences in measurement instruments. Additional analyses would be required, linking the different rates to other aspects of variation between countries, such as features of the school system, differences in other forms of aggression, or general tolerance of aggression, to understand the high variability. A further finding apparent from Figure 7.1 is that a substantial number of respondents reported both perpetration and victimization. An overlap in the roles of victims and perpetrators was also confirmed for cyberbullying in the meta-analysis by Kowalski 2018, who found an overall correlation between victimization and perpetration of R equals 0.51 between the two roles. These so-called bully victims have been identified in many studies as a particularly problematic group. Salma Valley 2010 pointed out that bullying needs to be examined in a group context, looking not only at the roles of bullies and victims, but also at those of peer witnesses who may assist or encourage the bully, intervene on behalf of the victim, or remain passive bystanders. Bullying frequently happens on a social stage, and the responses of those witnessing the bullying behavior of the aggressor may critically affect the course of events. Research based on the participant roles approach has identified 4 different roles in addition to those of the bully and victim: assistants of bullies, reinforcers of bullies, defenders of the victim, and outsiders. The higher the number of students in a classroom who condone bullying by assisting or reinforcing the bully, the more prevalent bullying behavior was found to be. Conversely, the more students are willing to defend the victim, the lower the rates of bullying and the less adverse the effects on victims' social adjustment. Unfortunately, many bystanders are reluctant to intervene on behalf of victims, despite holding negative attitudes about bullying. In an Australian study by Rigby and Johnson 2006, fewer than 10% of secondary school boys and girls said that they would certainly intervene if they witnessed verbal or physical bullying. Removing obstacles for defenders to come forward in support of victims is therefore an important objective for intervention efforts. See below. Figure 7.1. Rates of bullying and being bullied among 11 to 15-year-olds in 40 countries, regions. So they have the proportion of students reporting the behaviors of being a victim, a bully, or a bully victim in these 40 countries. Okay, so Canada is actually right beside the US. I'm very surprised at that. So in Canada, 23% have been victimized, and in the US, it's 22%. Oh, and this is in terms of boys. Okay, and then Canada and the US are still next to each other in terms of girls, where 16.7% have been bullied in Canada and 16.5% in the USA. That's almost identical. Risk factors for bullying perpetration and victimization. Beyond exploring the prevalence rates for bullying, it is important to ask what puts children and adolescents at risk of becoming victims or perpetrators of bullying. A meta-analysis integrating results from 153 individual studies provides some answers to this question by examining both personal characteristics and contextual variables associated with being a victim, a bully, or acting in both roles as a bully victim. Some risk factors were present in each of the three groups, whereas others were unique to the different roles. For example, low social problem-solving skills and internalizing symptoms, such as anxiety, were individual-level risk factors for membership of each of the three groups, as were negative family environment and low peer status as contextual risk factors. Among the unique predictors, it was found that poor academic performance predicted bullying, but not victimization or membership of the bully victim group. Furthermore, holding negative attitudes about others was a unique risk factor for bullying, and lack of social competence was more characteristic of victims and bully victims than of bullies. Cook et al. 2010 concluded that the group of bully victims had the greatest number of risk factors, corroborating earlier research, and they pointed out that this group should be particularly targeted by intervention efforts. A later meta-analysis by Klajovic and Hunt 2016 of 19 longitudinal studies with adolescents yielded consistent results. Conduct problems and social problems predicted both victimization and perpetration, whereas school problems were a specific risk factor for perpetration, and internalizing problems a specific risk factor for victimization. By the time they start school, children's moral development has progressed to a level where they are aware that bullying others is not an acceptable form of social behavior. Therefore, they need to find justifications for bullying to reduce its discrepancy with their moral standards. Based on Bandura's 1991 theory of moral agency, this process is called moral disengagement, which comprises several interlocking mechanisms. One mechanism is moral justification, which involves the cognitive reframing of the behavior to make it acceptable, for example, because everyone in a peer group shows it. The second mechanism is euphemistic labeling, which downplays the harmful character of the bullying behavior, for example, by calling it a joke. The third mechanism is exonerating comparisons, which minimizes the seriousness of bullying behavior by comparing it to other, more serious forms of behavior that violate moral standards. A meta-analysis by Killer et al. 2019 reviewed the evidence for a link between moral disengagement and involvement in different bullying roles, distinguished by the participant roles approach discussed above. They found positive associations between moral disengagement and both bullying perpetration and victimization, whereas moral disengagement was negatively related to defending. Bystanding was found to be unrelated to moral disengagement. The meta-analysis by Kowalski et al. 2014 identified a number of factors associated with a reduced likelihood of perpetration and victimization of cyberbullying. Significant negative correlations between cyberbullying perpetration and victimization were found for empathy, parental monitoring, perceived social support, a good school climate, and school safety. In addition, higher social intelligence and greater parental control of technology were associated with a lower likelihood of victimization. Consequences of bullying. Both perpetrating and experiencing bullying is associated with lasting adverse outcomes. A long-term longitudinal study by Matthews et al. 2017 followed boys from the age of 10 years over a mean period of 22 years. They found that being a bully in childhood predicted a greater number of negative health behaviors, such as smoking, and higher scores on the physical aggression, verbal aggression, anger, and hostility scales on the aggression questionnaire. AQ. Being bullied in childhood predicted a lower socioeconomic status, less perceived social support, less optimism, and more experiences of unfair treatment in adulthood. Both the bully and the victim group experienced more stressful life events as adults. The meta-analysis by Kowalski et al. 2014 also uncovered both overlapping and specific outcomes of cyberbullying perpetration and victimization. For both bullies and victims, elevated scores were found on measures of depression, anxiety, loneliness, and drug or alcohol use, and reduced scores were found on measures of self-esteem, life satisfaction, and academic achievement. Moreover, cyberbullying victimization showed a unique negative association with prosocial behavior and unique positive associations with somatic symptoms, stress, and suicidal ideation. The link between bullying, victimization, and suicide attempts was studied in 48 countries from the Global South, Africa, Asia, the Caribbean, and Latin America by Koyanagi et al. 2019. In their sample of almost 135,000 adolescents aged between 12 and 15 years, they found that, on average, 30.4% had experienced bullying in the past 30 days, and 10.7% had attempted suicide in the past 12 months. The attempted suicide rate was 3 times higher among those who reported bullying victimization. A longitudinal study conducted in Finland by Klomek et al. 2009 examined the link between bullying and victimization at the age of 8 years and attempted and completed suicides before the age of 25 years in a sample of more than 5,300 participants. Being a victim was associated with an increased suicidal risk. The odds that those who had been frequently bullied at age 8 attempted or completed suicide before the age of 25 were 6.3 times higher for girls and 3.8 times higher for boys compared with those not bullied at age 8. This figure is adjusted for conduct disorders and depression, assessed at age 8, which would be additional risk factors of suicide. In addition to these findings, there is meta-analytic evidence that being a bully or bully victim is associated with a heightened suicide risk. Holt et al. 2015 considered both traditional and cyberbullying and found significantly higher rates of both suicidal ideation and suicidal behavior in victims, bullies, and bully victims. The odds of suicidal behavior were about 4 times higher in the bully victim group, 3 times higher in the victim only, and 2.5 times higher in the bully-only group, all in comparison to individuals who were neither bullies nor victims. In combination, the studies discussed in this section provide clear evidence of the lasting negative effects of bullying. This impact has been demonstrated for both traditional and cyberbullying, and for both victimization and perpetration, with a potential additive impact on the bully victim group. A specific research question with regard to the impact of bullying behavior is whether engaging in bullying during childhood and/or adolescence is a risk factor for other forms of aggression in subsequent developmental periods. Bastille et al. 2009 reviewed a large body of evidence which showed that bullying shares many individual and contextual risk factors with sexual aggression, suggesting that bullies may be at greater risk of engaging in sexual aggression. Other studies found an overlap of risk factors for bullying and violence against intimate partners, arguing that both should be seen as expressions of a more general tendency to engage in aggression in social relationships. Adopting such a broader perspective on bullying also has important implications for anti-bullying interventions. For example, interventions that address shared risk factors, such as poor problem-solving skills, may be beneficial not only with regard to bullying, but also in reducing the risk of other forms of interpersonal aggression. Interventions. Responding to the evidence on adverse effects of bullying, many interventions have been developed to prevent bullying and/or mitigate its adverse consequences. An example of a theory-based intervention is the Kiva program developed in Finland by Salmivalli et al. 2011. As the authors explain, Kiva is an acronym for the words against bullying in Finnish and also means something that is nice, good, or friendly. The program can be used as a universal approach to preventing bullying and as targeted intervention when bullying has been identified as a problem. It combines lessons in which topics around bullying are discussed, such as group pressure or the effects of bullying on victims, complemented by exercises in small groups and content provided in a virtual learning environment. Enabling students to effectively counteract bullying behavior and support victims is also part of the program, as is a guide for parents. Several rigorous meta-analyses are available to evaluate the success of these programs. Reviewing the efficacy of school-based interventions designed to reduce traditional school bullying, the meta-analysis by Gaffney et al. 2019 included 100 studies. Their overview contains a detailed list of interventions examined in these studies that shows the broad range of available programs, with the Kiva program featuring prominently. Overall, they found a significant effect size for the reduction of reported bullying behavior across the set of studies, and a parallel significant effect size for a reduction in reported victimization, amounting to a reduction in the prevalence of both outcomes of about 15 to 16%. In a parallel meta-analysis of interventions directed at cyberbullying, Gaffney et al. 2019 included 24 studies, all with school-aged participants. Their findings indicate that cyberbullying interventions effectively reduce both perpetration and victimization. The magnitude of the effects is similar to those for traditional bullying interventions, suggesting that across all studies, cyberbullying perpetration was reduced by approximately 10 to 15%, and cyberbullying victimization by approximately 14%. It should be noted, however, that both meta-analyses evaluated the programs as a whole without examining their different components, so it is unclear to what extent the specific parts of the programs are necessary and successful. Such a more fine-grained analysis would be helpful for maximizing the efficacy of interventions and the cost-effectiveness of their implementation.